And into this video, we're going to talk about why Sony is delaying the launch of the Sony A7 IV for Q3 of 2021. That is actually like about a year away from now, and a lot of you guys have asked me here in the channel, should I wait for that camera or get something else? So I'm going to be addressing that question, and also I am going to be telling you why Sony is pushing that camera this far. All that information coming right up. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and before we continue, let me remind you about the giveaway of the Sony A7C that I'm giving away right here in the channel. And this one is the right box because in my last video I showed the A6400 because I also own that camera. But this is the one that I'm actually giving away with the kit lens. It's the black one, and all you have to do is simply subscribe to this channel, enable notification, and you must follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Gaston Shutters, and I'll be making the announcement on the 25th of December. Worldwide entries. Good luck to all of you guys. Alright, so let's talk about the Sony A7 IV, but before we need to understand what Sony has actually released and the different segments that we have in the Sony full frame, market. Let's talk about the latest camera that we actually got, the Sony A7C, because that camera actually opened a brand new segment for Sony, the pocketable, quotation marks, full frame experience. And that camera came out around, I believe, $1,800. It is $1,799. And when that camera was announced, a lot of people were thrown, off and say, who needs that camera and why this camera doesn't feature newer technologies. But the here that we need to understand right here is that that camera was not intended in particular to change the game in full frame. It was more of a camera to attract new people to full frame, whether, they were coming from other brands or whether they were coming from APS-C cameras. Now, the form factor, as you know, is very similar, like an A6600. And it's such a great camera. I own it myself. We still have the same 4K 8-bit, and it's pretty much the same as the Sony A7 III with slightly refinements when it comes to video performance. Now, we're not going to be talking about the camera, in depth because we have done a lot of videos. If you want to learn more about those particular cameras that we're going to be talking today, go back in the channel and check those videos. So with the Sony A7 IV, Sony opened a brand new market, catering to the pocketable experience, much more reduced, form factor, full frame. Now, that camera has been doing really good. I talked to two photography stores that I shop from and also Sony rep here in Miami, and they just cannot keep up with that camera. So definitely Sony nailed it with the Sony A7C, even though, it's not what everyone was expecting. Now, let's talk about the Sony A7S III because it is another camera that was introduced this year, not too many months ago, and it is a camera that sits right there when it comes to video-centric cameras as the flagship camera. Now, the Sony A7S III comes at a time where Canon introduces the 8K monster that in reality, had a lot of problems. And here, Sony coming with a camera at $3,500, 4K video, non-stop recording. It does 4K up to 120 frames per second. It also can output raw video, via HDMI, full-size HDMI, flip-out screen, full touchscreen capabilities, a brand new menu, and kind of like setting up the standard for, upcoming Sony cameras. I own the Sony A7S III, and I gotta testify that it's just an amazing camera, guys. Now let's talk about another segment, which is the documentary segment, the sport photography, wedding photography, and there's a particular camera that actually fulfills that need, and it is the A9 series. Now we have two releases for the A9, the A9I and the A9II, and those cameras are pretty similar when it comes to specs and feature. There is not a substantial upgrade from the A9I and the A9II. I also own the A9I, and we've been using that camera for video, non-stop for the past, 3 years. It's just such a great camera. Now, we have heard that the next camera that we're going to see announced is going to be the A93. And there is a reason why we're going to see that camera first, and we have seen all this camera before we even see the Sony A7 IV. Hang on with me, I'll tell you in just a moment. So the A93 is going to be a camera promising up to 8K video, 30p capabilities. Now remember, it is a camera for documentary. Most people are going to use it for photography first and then video. But if you're a photographer or someone that does documentaries, you may actually want to jump on board if you hear that your favorite camera right now can actually have incredible video specs, right? Kind of like getting the best out of every single world in just one body. So this is the reason why Sony is going to release this camera before we even hear about the Sony A7 IV, because we have the Sony A7C that opens a brand new market. We have also the Sony A7S III, a camera that actually took about 5 years to come out, and it also capitalizes in the video-centric market. And now we're gonna see the Sony A9iii, which is also going to cover all the needs for documentaries, sport photographies, and wedding. Now, this is what would have happened if Sony would have released the Sony A7IV before they released the Sony A7S III or before they announced the A9iii. What would happen is that this camera is going to be kind of what the Sony A7 III did 3 years ago when that camera was released. And remember, the king of low light back then was the Sony A7S II, which was a great camera, but the Sony A7 III destroyed the sales of the Sony A7S II, or at least the interest. You know, number one, with the Sony A7 III, a camera that only cost $2,000, we had, right off the bat, better autofocusing system, longer battery life, better technology, better video specs, and the list goes on. So Sony's not going to want to make that mistake because they have learned from their own mistake, you know, with the Sony A7 III, a camera that came in at $2,000 and really killed the Sony A7S II. You know, a lot of people went to the Sony A7 III altogether. So this is the reason why the Sony A7 IV is not going to see the light before Sony actually covers all the different segments that they have created with flagship cameras. And to think about the Sony A7 IV and Q3 kind of like makes a lot of sense from a business perspective because, like I mentioned before, we are going to have all the bases covered. Now, one thing that we are going to see, we're going to see most likely an RX100 Mark VIII, but this camera is actually not going to influence the full frame market. So we also may see another APS-C camera. You know, a lot of people have been asking here in the channel about the A7000, which it could be kind of like a high-end APS-C camera. It may do 10-bit. It may once again open kind of like another segment in APS-C or even revive APS-C. Now, I don't know if Sony is going to continue the development with APS-C sensors because, to be honest with you, the Sony A7C kind of like replaces the APS-C market. You know, number one, there are a lot of compact full frame lenses right now, you know, such as the 35mm f1.8, 55mm size f1.8, the 85 f1.8. So there's kind of like not so much necessity to go to APS-C, you know, and also added with the added bonus of you know, larger sensor, better low light capabilities, better shallow depth of field, and so on. So Sony is going to be announcing the Sony A7 IV, most likely, you know, Q3, like it has been rumored. And again, they may actually want to release that camera sooner, but that is going to be depending what the competition has under the sleeve. And we have seen this, you know, in the past where Canon announces the camera and all of a sudden there is an announcement from Sony. So probably Sony already has A7 IV in stock, to be honest with you. I don't think that that is an ongoing project. I think the project is over. And chances are that we're going to see the 4K 10-bit, hopefully up to 60p, you know, a camera that's going to have a flip-out screen. Chances are, you know, we're going to see a lot of the main features that we're going to find in the A9iii and the A7S III strip away. So most likely Sony is still going to want to send you to buy the most expensive cameras such as the Sony A7S III or A9iii if you want the full enchilada. So this is what I think why Sony is delaying the Sony A7 IV. And to be honest with you, we can expect this camera to be at around $2,500. You know, we have seen that Sony's actually jacking up $500 with its full frame releases, the brand new ones. And what's going to happen is that the Sony A7 III is still going to be a relevant camera in 2021, 2022, and I think a lot of people are going to still going for the Sony A7 III, you know, especially those that are getting with full frame. But now you have two cameras to choose from, the Sony A7C and the Sony A7 III. Let me know what you think, guys. Drop your comments down below, and as always, subscribe to this channel for more content like this one. I'll see you in the next video.